Hello, thanks everybody so much for joining us tonight. My name is Christy Galarza and I work for Lake County Building Generation. I facilitate the Housing Coalition. And I'm partnering tonight with the County Community Planning and Development to help facilitate this meeting. Just want to start off with, we all love Lake County, right? And we all have different opinions, but we're all neighbors. So we want to make sure that this interaction tonight, we all leave still feeling great about our neighbors. So please respect everyone's opinion and be neighborly during these interactions. We ask that you hold your questions till the end of our presentation. And then if you were able to scan the QR code before it locked you out, we're ready to go on to our activity that we have tonight.
Oh, and the address.
Yeah, I messed up.
Oh,
So if you do have access to it, please pull up your phone and enter in what brought you here tonight. We'll just take a little time to see what it says. About half the people got to do it and half didn't. It's okay. It's fine. We will do like hybrid, half technology and half in person. Has anybody entered in what you?
Anita, there's a spot up there.
What brought you here tonight?
There's one right here. So. There's a chair up here. I'm just glad I was trying to sneak in unnoticed. Thanks.
That went well.
Okay, it's not gonna work. That's okay. So let's just shift and do an in-person opportunity. Can someone share why you're here tonight? Anyone? Go ahead.
I'm a long-term renter.
You're a long-term renter. Great. Who else? Why are you here tonight? Go ahead.
Well, for a very long time, I thought the house on Mackinac Drive was a short-term rental because it was always short-term people staying there. For that, and yet they've been doing it for that purpose. So
Concerns about short-term rental.
yeah, people say one thing, we're doing it other places.
Yeah. Who? In the back.
We're interested in preserving short-term rentals for community members that live here part-time or full-time.
Great. Anyone else? Up front,
Yeah, I want some consistency of the policy.
consistency.
Recently bought a house that was a short-term rental full-time. When I bought it, I was told the license was transferable. We live here, but during 4 months of the year, we short-term rent. And so I called the county and the county said, well, really, no, it's not transferable. You have to apply for a new one and we're not accepting your application. So I called the realtor called somebody at the town hall or at the planning department and said to call this person. And then they said, okay, yeah, you're in good standing. So we're going to give you a rental license. So I have a short-term rental license for 2023. 2024, they're like, well, we can't make any guarantees. Maybe yes, maybe no.
So you want to help inform the policy that might go into place next year? I think
Yeah,
that's what I'm
because
hearing.
I can do, I mean, even the mining company close to here needs people for 3 or 4 months, so I can long-term rent if I can't short-term rent during the winter. But if I find out my neighbor down the street got his license renewed for short-term rental and I didn't get my license renewed, then I'm gonna be upset. So I'm looking for consistency of policy.
Yeah, so I think what I'm hearing, I'm gonna take one more. I saw Barbara in the back, seems really excited. We'll do Barbara and then I'm gonna wrap us up.
I'm just because I'm a long-term, I've been here 25 years homeowner, and I just want to make sure I still have some neighbors around that I can depend on, and I just like the idea that we're all talking about it and doing it right. I'm not against.
Awesome. So I think what I'm hearing, a consistent theme through every single person is that you really care about Lake County and you want to make sure that this is done right and you want to make sure your voice is heard. Which is the whole point of this meeting tonight. So thanks so much for coming out. I'm going to hand it off to our next presenter.
My name is Joey Edwards. I am a county planning commissioner for Lake County. And just a few things to go over as a county planning commissioner. The county oversees regulations for short-term rentals only in the county, not in the city. So they are separate regulations. So we are doing regulations, or we're discussing regulations for short-term rentals outside of the city in unincorporated Lake County. Secondly, the planning commission is charged with formulation and revision of comprehensive master plans, like the Lake County Comprehensive Plan. Zoning regulations, subdivision regulations, conditional use permits. We also conduct site-specific plan reviews associated with all of the above. The County Planning and Zoning Commission meets generally on the second and fourth Mondays of the month at 4 o'clock in the county courthouse on Harrison Avenue. Those meetings are open to the public, so you are welcome to join in or view them at any time. You can find information on those meetings on our website. The Planning and Zoning Commission is a volunteer advisory board to the Board of County Commissioners. So we are advising the Board of County Commissioners on making regulations. Short-term rental review, which is what we're discussing tonight, is a legislative process. In other words, it's a process that involves the community. The community helps us make the regulations that are coming up, and it's something that we discuss with you as a community. Public comment is important because it informs and helps shape the recommendations and decisions made by the Planning Commission and given to the Board of County Commissioners in creating legislative changes. And I will turn it over to the next person.
Hi, everyone. For anyone that doesn't know who I am, I'm Ann Schneider. I'm the Director of Community Planning and Development. I am just thrilled to see such an amazing turnout. I just want to start off with that we really, when we started this, the public engagement portion, we really saw a need to have two different town hall meetings. We really wanted to come down to Twin Lakes specifically because you have unique concerns specific to your area of the county. And so we really felt like this was a very special opportunity for us. So thank you very much for allowing us this amazing opportunity to be down in your neck of the woods, so to speak. So let's just start off with why a moratorium. I don't think you can probably turn on any news update that short-term rentals aren't something that you're hearing about throughout the state. It's also a national concern. So, this is not atypical. This is something that's happening in many communities, a conversation about what short-term rentals mean and what regulations should look like. Locally, we've had an increase in certainly in the interest, in the demand. We are at CPD, we are realizing that sometimes people are building homes simply for the intent of short-term renting them. And we had a significant increase in the amount of new licenses and interest in new licenses. So we thought this was really a pivotal time that we needed to consider and look at what does that mean, that new increase. We also are receiving a uptick in complaints on short-term rentals, an increase in environmental concerns specific to the over maximization of short-term rentals and the impacts to wells and septic systems, or to wells from septic systems. Obviously, in your community, that is a significant concern. Also, we have seen there's a new trend in short-term rentals, something that the code hadn't contemplated before. Now short-term rentals sometimes include an experience associated with them. Maybe that's an outfitting and guiding aspect to short-term rentals. That's not anything that our code ever anticipated. And so it really is a time to take a time out and just kind of evaluate where we are. So we took all of this to the Board of County Commissioners. They agreed and they allowed us some time to do some research and make sure that we have something that is the right fit for the community. So that's really the basis of why we are where we are today. The next is, let's talk about the process and where we're at. So we started the moratorium in September, and it took us some time to go through and identify where we were. What properties were in compliance, what licensed properties still had outstanding features that weren't compliant. So we had to go through that period. And then we went through a period of time of identifying non-compliant short-term rentals. And those have been served cease and desist letters at this point. The next part of our work, and that is ongoing and will continue through the next couple months, is really looking and identifying the impacts associated with short-term rentals, everything from the economics of them and the benefit and detriment, both sides of that equation from an economic standpoint. We are engaged on a lodging feasibility study that's really going to look at what short-term rentals do to market value, as well as what kind of impacts both positive and negative caps on short-term rental licenses might have. We're also looking at the environmental concerns that I've already spoken about. Obviously, there is a great concern from our housing coalition and our housing partners about the impact of short-term rentals on our current housing needs. Community character is something that we absolutely hear about on a probably very regular basis. And also the sustainability of short-term rentals within our community. Tonight is our first community feedback. We really need to hear and make sure that you're helping inform this process for us. And so we're really excited for this first opportunity to really hear from you and make sure that what we're doing really resonates with what the concerns are. Next, we'll be looking at the code review and really making sure that our regulations are where they should be, or if we need to make modifications to those. Lastly, we will be coming up with a recommendation that we will take to the Board of County Commissioners with the help of the Planning Commission. And we will also bring that back out to the people and make sure that, again, we are making sure that these recommendations really resonate with our community. And then lastly will be the implementation of where we land on the regulations eventually. I will turn it back over to Christy.
One second before we start questions.
It's not a question. I just want to make a quick comment because a lot of you are familiar, see, some of you are not. We do not have a public restroom in this building. If you have to go to the bathroom, there is a portalet that's next door to the building, just right to the east of us. And I checked it, it's clean. Sorry, I just thought about that.
So if you got here before we started the presentation and signed in, you would have got these stickers. That's because we're gonna be doing something called a dot voting activity, and don't worry, it doesn't involve technology, so it should go smoothly. But I want you to help us populate some ideas on all of these sheets. So the sheets over here are about regulations, solutions. And the sheets up here, as Anne said, are about benefits and concerns. So first, I want you to take your time writing your thoughts up here. And then after everybody has written some thoughts, I want you to vote on the two that are most important to you on this side, and two that are most important to you on this side. If you have not got stickers yet, I'll meet you at the back and get some stickers for you. And just so you know, this data is going to help inform what the elected and appointed officials are talking about in these meetings. They'll say like, this is what we heard from Twin Lakes versus this is what we heard from Leadville. I want you to not be shy. I want you to just throw anything out there. This is the brainstorming phase, and you might have a solution or a thought that we never have considered. And then the last thing tonight is if you have more robust thoughts. Sure, I'll get to you in a second. If you have more robust thoughts, please grab one of these flyers before you leave. It has another QR code on it that will work. And URLs down here at the bottom where you can submit a very lengthy public comment. So feel free to do that, or you can just scan this one if you don't want to take the paper.
And how will the people on Zoom vote?
Yep, so we're gonna give them a survey to fill out rather than trying to like work it through. So once we get, we're gonna do questions for a little bit, but once we get going, we'll ask that some of these chairs kind of move this way, so there's a little more space. But now we're ready for some questions.
Chrissy, if you don't mind, I was just gonna piggyback on that. Joey and I were just, wanted to let everyone know that public comment that you would go online. So you can go to that QR code takes you to the county website and then to community planning and development. And you can put as much public comment as you want there. The only thing that we ask is that you include your name. Anonymous comments, we don't take into the work. So we just ask that you include that. And then we also read your comments into the record. So please know that your voice just continues to be part of this process. So we just wanted to throw that in too. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, you had a list of areas you were doing research, et cetera, on it. You could get back to that. Can you all comment on what you've learned so far from the research you've been doing for the last 5 to 6 months? Just so we know sort of what's been covered, what you're finding, how you've done some of this. That's sort of a big piece, I think, when we all start to get up there and put things on the.
Absolutely. And so, I think the first focus, like I said, has really been on identifying how many non-compliant properties that we had. And, we've had some data that had come in from other sources that we had an extraordinary amount of non-compliant properties. And I would say that we were more in the range of 30 in the county that were non-compliant. We did have some issues with licensed properties as well. And so I think all except one, we've been able to get all of our licensed folks into compliance. Our non-compliant, I think we're getting very close to having resolved those issues. I will let you know that there are situations that still exist that are zoning violations that branch outside of short-term rental. So there are some situations that have been brought to our attention. I don't want to highlight any particular property tonight. I don't think that's really the intent. But they're going into a zoning enforcement situation. So if it's it appears that the violation was short-term rental, unlicensed, but it has some other attributes about it that are actually zoning related, non-compliant situations, we're really working on that. So I have to say that we've spent a lot of time taking in the data that we had, making sure we know exactly where we are with licensing. So that was the front end of the work. And so now we are looking at legal aspects. One of the considerations that we've heard a lot from the community is to consider owner occupied, which aids in sustainability of home ownership versus second home ownership, absentee owners renting out their properties. And so we've had the community suggest that there should be a preference given to situations where it aids in the sustainability of primary resident ownership situations. So that's something that we're looking into with the help of our legal partners. Our legal partners are really diving into looking at just all of the different aspects of equality in our new regulations that we might consider. We're also actively, we're very close to engagement with a cost recovery analysis on the impact of current licensing fees versus maybe what they should be. We are also, we've started work with through our environmental partners looking at the impact to groundwater and to areas that don't have centralized utilities and the over maximizing of septic systems. And then we're hoping to be engaged with a company called Community Builders, who will really dive into the technical aspects of our code and just see what other communities around the state are doing and see if there's some lessons learned there. There's one other aspect I didn't bring up, I'm so sorry, is the lodging feasibility study. And so we have consultants that are starting that work. We should have some results from them in August. And that's really looking at, I think I already kind of talked about, the impact on market value and also what kind of impact we would have on initiating a cap system. So I don't think I have a lot of findings to provide to you right now, but just kind of that, maybe that kind of gives you an idea of kind of the different aspects that we're engaged in right now.
Can you define non-compliant? What is that?
Absolutely. So non-compliant would be either operating without a license or operating outside of the standards associated with a license.
The standards?
Right, so there are certain standards associated with a short-term rental license. Things like having to have a 24-hour emergency contact, making sure that your license number is listed in your advertising. We have a whole list of different standards associated, and and complaints are one as well. So if we are receiving complaints of nuisances, noise, noise is always kind of a big one. So if we've taken any kind of complaints in on a short-term rental, then we investigate those and determine if we have a situation. The code calls for revocation hearings. So if we have a history of complaints, then we have the ability within the code to take those before the Board of County Commissioners for a show cause hearing for the potential of a revocation. If revocations are successful, there's an inability to apply for a license for 2 years. So gives you a little bit of an idea, maybe.
I have a question online here. You were saying you're looking into sustainability. Could you maybe define for us how you're thinking about sustainability or the specifics around that?
Sustainability from both the economic sustainability as well as environmental sustainability. So that would be specific to the 2 different ways in which we would, or aspects of sustainability that we'd really focus on.
Okay, I have a follow-up question. Sorry. Oh, go ahead.
So sustainability also, we're also considering the positive impact of sales tax and lodging tax that we realize as a county from short-term rentals. So economics are, we've got a lot of different angles at which we're looking at that, as well as environmental sustainability.
Okay, perfect. My follow-up question is around environmental sustainability. And if you guys are looking at that for short-term rentals, in tandem, have you looked at that with the amount of campers that we have in the area? I know you guys are concerned about like groundwater and septic issues, but also like from a wildfire perspective, and comparing that and contrasting that, the short-term rentals, the pros and cons versus the amount of campers that we have in the area and the risk to the environment based off of that.
I think you bring up a good point and kind of a separate, so we do, part of our department is also community outreach and education and code enforcement. So I would say that falls into kind of another category that is actively pursued within the department, but we haven't done a comparison between the 2.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing the steps and phases that you guys are going through. I appreciate that. Do you have an estimate of when you would get to the implementation phase?
So we have an ambitious schedule. The end of the moratorium is the end of September.
Right.
And so we're very hopeful that we can meet that deadline. But we do have a lot of work to get through between here and there. So I think that is what our target date is. There might be a possibility of being at the end of the moratorium with our recommendation, but we may need a little more time for implementation. That's for the Board of County Commissioners to decide, and not really for staff, but that's our target. It is, but I will at least let everyone know that's pretty ambitious.
Thank you.
We could not hear the date
Yes.
I have a couple, first a story. Last, I don't remember if it was January. I had someone fly in from Houston to look at my house. And they were looking at it from a short-term rental basis. And when they heard of the moratorium, they left. And it was a $2.5 million offer. So I want you to know that there is a real impact to this deal. The other is a fairly simple but really new solution to many of your problems, I think. Do any of you know that VRBOs had a lot of problems with people renting for 2 days and 500 people show up and they party and trash their house? VRBO has introduced a technology where they can track the number of phones inside a house. And they know exactly how many phones are in that house. They can also track the noise levels in that house. And so if it exceeds whatever, let's say your house is 3 for septic issues, has 3 bedrooms. If you have more than 4 or 5 phones in there, you're in violation. And so the management company, whether that's an individual or an actual company, can be notified immediately and it can be dealt with. And I would suggest that that is probably the simplest solution to the stuff you're looking at. Because you can limit a house, the number of occupants, based on whatever your environmental concerns are, based on the rating of the septic system.
So we already licensed based on septic.
But you're not
occupancy.
enforcing it based on that. This is a method of enforcement. You can't keep 15 people out of a 3-bedroom house unless you know that there's 12 phones in there.
Right. We do rely on property owners having a vested interest in making sure that their rental agreements with their renters are
Right.
up to par. And so there is a reliance. And I will also say that for a long time, and even when the city was doing their short-term rental regulations, we were really pioneers in Lake County. We've had short-term regulations since 1999. I did a revision to them in 2017. But for a long time, short-term rentals, I would have suggested to everyone we're functioning well, and we didn't have the concerns that we're experiencing now. And so, even when the city was saying, maybe it's time that the county look at a cap, my recommendation at that time was that we weren't there. And that, we probably, owners really did have a vested interest in really making sure and ensuring that short-term rentals were successful. But I would say that we are seeing some new trends that we need to take that time out and consider, but that is great information that in technology.
Well, and I'm opposed to a cap because that favors the grandfathered in licenses. It doesn't take into effect new licenses. But
so I would just suggest that a cap, there isn't a decision on how a cap would work. So I don't think that, I think assuming that would mean that existing licenses would have that first opportunity. I would say that we don't have, that's when this next public engagement opportunity is when we'll be able to really bring our ideas forward and see where they land with the public.
And if the license is transferable, then the license becomes a substantial amount of the value of the property.
Sure.
And that discriminates against people who don't have a license.
So I would say
And
that
it's
was
a 2-tiered system.
So these are some great recommendations that I would encourage you to include on the sheet, but we're gonna move on to the next person.
Chrissy, can I just answer that though really quick?
Yeah.
So the transferable was the only for 2023, as the gentleman in the front said, there's been no guarantees what that's gonna look like for 2024 and future years. So that was only during this moratorium period.
I
So
just want you to look into the technology of controlling the numbers.
Thank
Because
you.
that is the issue with groundwater, is the numbers.
Thank you.
So we're gonna tell your family members too?
Well, my grandkids all have phones and they're 10 years old.
And they're gonna be on your internet?
I don't know.
I think we had a question back here.
Could you tell us what approximately, short-term rental, lodging, tax and sales tax bring in for you?
Colleen?
Yeah, I can't give you that. I can't give you that beyond this tonight. I can't give that to you without looking at that, so.
I could give you an estimate of what I believe the last reported year was in the county, and Colleen, please correct me if I'm wrong.
I have to look it up. I don't memorize numbers.
No, I'm just gonna go to the nearest 100,000. Around 300,000, I think, was what was collected in 23, and so that
Oh, for just the county.
for the county, yes.
How many, short-term rentals does that translate to?
Well, okay, so the accommodation tax is more than just short-term rentals. That's also hotels, motels, and camping.
So you can't pull that out, but right now in Lake County, we have 127 licensed.
That's the
Short-term
county,
rentals.
not the city.
That's just the
How
county.
many homes total?
127 is what we have
No, I
licensed.
mean, just housing stock, how many homes are in the county overall?
Our total housing stock, I know that I think at 127, we're only about 7% or 8% of the housing units. Approximately, so.
Okay, I am on the tourism panel, which is the recipient of the lodging tax. 0.9%, right?
Yes,
And in 2022, our total revenue was $318,194.96. That money can only be spent to market and promote tourism and to support visitor centers. Those are the only three things under the state statute that are allowable for that money. And so what's supporting our small businesses in Lake County is tourism. And so we want to attract tourists to support our businesses.
Is there any reason that the website, the interactive website, is not collecting positive results of the memories that are made by people who come here and are able to use the home instead of a hotel room to experience the country? Do you have any reason that you're not accepting positive things about that, only negative? Because it's only on the website, your website is only complaints. You don't have any place where you can actually offer the idea that we really had a wonderful experience coming here and are grateful the ability to do whatever they did with a home instead of a hotel room.
Or the recommendation of the host saying go to the Twin Lakes Tavern and they go every night.
so
Rather than a local person who goes once a month, maybe once a week.
Sure.
The impact is substantial for us.
I think it'd be really nice.
the short-term rental comment form is open to any kind of comment.
It says complaint.
Short-term rental comment form, I'm looking at it right now.
I just said public comment.
It says short-term rental comment form.
Just pulled it up.
I think you're looking at something different, and that's to help them enforce when there's problems. This is a separate form.
We do have a complaint form that's on our website for zoning complaints. We do have a zoning complaint form that you can fill out if you want to make a zoning complaint, but we have our website up right now. It's a short-term rental comment form.
It's in Almond red on your website, complaint.
Yeah, so just to clarify, it's two different things, right? That's a separate mechanism, but this is for comment.
Yeah,
It is comment.
yeah. So the complaint form is for any zoning complaint that we take in, illegal camping or, whatever noise or that we do have an ability for the public to come in and make a complaint, a zoning related complaint, but it's a completely different form. But
Maybe another question, so. Are you making the distinction between the city of Leadville and the county? And you talk about the county, okay.
yes,
And are you considering, even in the county, different areas? I mean, I would almost say,
that's-
Twin Lakes, we have the county. We are different than whatever, Wayne Forest or Hennard, and are you considering possible? Like,
absolutely, we are, Jan. And that's again, I think when he started was identifying that's why we're here. And we're also doing a town hall in Leadville at Freight. Is because, and if anyone was joined us during the start of consideration of the moratorium, we brought in a lot of mapping so we could look at the saturation in different areas. And so absolutely, Jan, that is really a focus of the work is what areas are seeing the highest saturation levels. We have all of that data thanks to John Costello when he was in the department before, but we went through and really looked at where were the highest concentrations of short-term rentals.
Concern, I'm sorry, the concentration.
It is.
The lake happens to be a big attraction to people from all over the country. And that drives the demand, and that's the reason there's more concentration around the lake.
Sure. I also think that we're looking at it from an environmental standpoint. That's really the saturation. Is,
So
are we in an area?
environmental, I think you have to get specific to a particular residence and what may be happening there that may not be correct,
Okay,
rather than blanket everything.
right. I think that we were looking at areas that are not on centralized utilities. Yes, not on centralized utilities.
So if you have a brand new septic and you are a short-term rental owner, that rapidly complies with a 4-person septic. And I've even called and registered complaints against non-compliance for concern for the warden. And you spend $50,000 on a new septic. And you have a device that not only registers the number of people, but the sound levels, whether or not they're smoking, whether or not there's humidity, whether or not there's, anything that could cause a problem. You get an immediate thing all day, all night on your phone. And you're doing all those things and you invested in a vacation home. And now it has to be your primary residence. And there are, say, 100 short-term rentals in Twin Lakes. How did those 100 people rectify their financial lives? Do they all just put their home on the market at that moment? And what happens to the home values at that point? What happens to the inn or Tenderfoot Farms or Leadville Railroad that I sent coupons to all my people to go to? What happens to the 1,153 people I brought to the community last year and acted as the concierge to sell tourism in my community? What happens to us as a homeowner? This is a historically vacation community. This is not historically a home community. If you can look
I disagree.
on both sides of my house are about 15 relatives that date back 50 to 100 years.
Lodging.
And I would say what you are bringing up is exactly what we want to hear tonight, and we're gonna ask you to put that on the sheet.
But I want to understand if you're going to make it a primary residence requirement.
We're just in the brainstorming
Yeah,
phase at
right.
this point.
But if you did, how can you short-term rent a whole house and make it the home to which you customarily return? The two things are diametrically opposed. You can't live there and rent out the whole house, especially if you don't have a basement or a garage to put everything in. And you can't be there when the guest is there. Nobody wants to stay with you.
So I absolutely respect your opinion and like Chrissy said, great, give that to us in big ideas. Also, maybe you brought up some ways that some great standards that everybody should do. You know, you said that you have a lot of different monitoring technology and ways. And so I would just suggest that you could give those to us as ideas for standards associated. So it sounds like you have some great information. So thank you and totally respect your opinion, respect everybody's opinion here. And I do, also just want to mention that we are trying very hard to keep things very neutral and we really want to take both sides and the thoughts. And so please give them to us. As staff for the Board of County Commissioners and the Planning Commission, we will make sure that we bring all of that information forward. So thank you for
And you're not
input.
able to give any input onto what a primary residence might look like. I know it's not decided, Like, how can you short-term rent a place that you live in at the same time? I
So-
don't even understand, I can't figure it out.
Okay, well, I would suggest, which is, okay,
subject.
okay, different subject. So I would just suggest that the models that we have seen, that are, that is their primary residence, and they leave for the months, typically in June and August, or July and August. And they would rent their house for several weeks at a time in those 2 months, and the rest of the time they reside in it as their primary residence. That's the model that we typically see when we get somebody that comes forward and says that this is their primary residence and they utilize it on a short-term rental basis. There's certain times within the community that has heightened amount of races during the race times, that they will open up their house to short-term rental. And so that's how I would define it for
So I
you.
should just commute 3 hours to Denver.
I'm not suggesting that you should do anything.
That we allow some other people to participate. No offense. We appreciate all of your comments, but let's hear other comments.
Is there a long-term rental shortage? in Lakeville?
Yes, yes. Our housing director can tell you that we have people waitlisted. How many people do we have on the wait list?
292 without attempting to create a list.
Wow. I have long-term rented to people for many years. Right now, I have a dozen tenants out of state. Short-term rentals are new to me. The reason we short-term rent is because we're not here for 5 months in the winter. I want somebody in my home. But if the county had some sort of plan and they incentivize to find somebody that would live long-term for 5, 6 months.
292 people that I can send.
Even for just
Yes,
5 months,
absolutely.
because that is an
Think
alternative.
of your CNC students, right? Think of your people who are working at Ski Cooper.
Yeah,
We'll
'cause
get you somebody.
Yeah,
Just
and
reach out to Jackie.
with the proper deposit and the proper oversight, long-term renters are easier on the property than short-term renters. Definitely.
Actually, no, short-term rental properties maintained constantly. Long-term rentals fall into the, you cannot access the property legally during the lease.
Sir, thank you so much. You have got some great big ideas for us that we would love to hear on the input form. And I would just encourage that if there's anybody else that wants to speak, and then maybe we should get to our voting.
Okay, I have one person online and then we have.
Okay, you know what, it's only gonna take me a couple of minutes, so. Anyway, the only thing I can say is that if we went ahead and invested money into this property that we have, of course, in Panarch, and what we did is, and that was a short-term rental, but we go on up there and we have fun and we use the house and we have a good time with it and we short-term rent it, but those people that are in that house and short-term renting, you know, what they do is they come on down here and they put money into all these businesses down here. And they put money into all the restaurants and everything else that's around, a lot more than we do. I mean, we're retired teachers, for God's sake.
And they even get to know our neighbors like we do.
I mean, they get to know our neighbors and
They do.
right over there, and you know what? And we control how many people that are there. I mean, we know, we've got devices that tell us, hey, this is what's going on in the house, you know, these guys are online, these people aren't, you know what, these devices are in this house right now. And we know we know the humidity up there, we know the people that are up there, we know, I mean, we don't have cameras. Don't get me wrong, we don't do that. I mean, you can have cameras if you want, okay, but, hey, you know, anyway, the thing is, that's what we do. So I'm just saying, hey, but we rely on that income because we would have put that income into something else if we would have understood, oh, well, they're gonna pull the rug out from underneath. You know, but we're retired teachers and we rely on that income, even though this is our second house. The first house was in Glen.
Not to have to sell it.
Yeah, not to have to sell. We don't want to sell. We want this income as our retirement. And we've got this income for our retirement.
Thank
Okay.
you so much. We got one person online that we're gonna field a question for, and then we're gonna take the front row lady that had a question earlier, and then we're gonna move on to our activity. Lee, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, great. So I am new to the community. As of last year, I built my house, over the last couple of years. And I just want to say this is an amazing community, number one. Super happy. I know all my neighbors. We all look out for one another. So a meeting like this is really important for something that can affect all of us. I just want to say I come from other resort communities. And I just had a question, and I think it's something for everyone to think about. Are we a resort community? Or is that where we're headed? As far as, you know, the sustainability for the businesses that are here now, what do they rely on? Do they rely on the residents or do they rely on the tourism? And I think that, you know, I've seen in many other communities where the taxes from the short-term rentals goes towards affordable housing. I've been involved in affordable housing from that perspective as well. And I understand it's for tourism now, but just a thought. So two things, really kind of asking everyone to kind of, let's think about who we are and where we're going and what we do and do not want to do. And I think that looking at how the tax revenue is spent could be something that could be looked at you know, at the level of the jurisdiction. I think that that's something that is important. I don't necessarily feel one way or the other about the rentals. I think that it's, I want everyone to feel like they are served though. I think all property owners should feel like they're being served, but we're a community. So I think that regardless of what we write down on paper, we're all going to be looking after one another. At least that's what I've experienced so far. So anyway, that's my little bit.
Thanks so much, Lee. We'll circle back to you in the front. You had a question a while ago.
Okay, we are full-time residents that live here. And the one thing that I would like for you people to consider is the saturation of areas with short-term rentals, because and we're in an area that is quite saturated. That does have an impact on the value of our home, because there are people that come in and want to buy, to live full-time, and don't want to live around a community of primarily short-term rent.
Sure.
Thank you.
Patiently.
I've read the policies, and I would just, this is just sort of a recommendation to you. If the county has code requirements related to noise, to water, to septic, and to sound, will you include in your policy just citations that it is expected that short-term rental owners will acknowledge that they understand the codes and the requirements and will agree to abide by them? That just a citation in the policy to things which are important to a lot of us about sound, noise, and rest. There is no sort of, just to make it clear in the policy that the county does have requirements and et cetera, would be a real help.
Could I just dovetail off of her comment? If that is done, there has to be a mechanism for enforcement. And I think that people that are requiring all of this additional enforcement should pay that cost. That shouldn't be borne by the people that choose not to have a short-term rental, to have your code enforcement and your sheriff's office and everyone else out when it doesn't work. When it works and it's appropriate and it's safe and you're not harming anyone else's septic or well, which you can have a great septic yourself, but if someone else is overburdening and even having a $50,000 septic system, if it's not being used appropriately and ends up being overused, you can still foul your expensive septic and foul someone else as well.
Before we get talking too much, because the folks online won't be able to hear us, I just want to let the folks online know, we're going to share in the chat two things with you. A link to the survey that we'd like for you to fill out tonight, please, in lieu of participating in the voting activity. And then we're also going to share with you that link where you can submit a more robust public comment. And make sure you please include your name. And I think we are ready to start moving.